Kevin Williams and Matt Manley from the Shore Sports Network, and the weather has finally started to warm up, so you know we're deep into baseball season, and really we're already getting into what is the postseason. It is certainly tournament time throughout the Shore Conference, the big one, the Shore Conference Tournament, and of course the NJSIAA tournament coming up. Matt has a complete preview on shoresportsnetwork.com of the Shore Conference Tournament, although it hasn't been seeded yet. It will be in just a few days, but as we get set for that, would we describe this as a wide-open affair, or have you narrowed down a few teams that you think have a legit shot to win this?
I think the Monmouth County Tournament showed that even if we might think there are a few dominant teams that are the favorites, you never really know. CBA lost to RBC, so that's not stunning. Red Bank Catholics is a junior-heavy team that's getting better every week, so that's not really that surprising that they would step up and beat a team like CBA, who's been #1 for a while. But, you know, Wall losing to Colts Neck, I think, was kind of opened the window into the possibility of good teams or teams that have been in the top 3, top 2 all year, possibly getting knocked off by a team that could play well. It's baseball, so more than most sports, yes, you could have a team that you would expect to be in a championship game lose early. But yeah, I think there are some teams that have separated themselves. I think those 3 Monmouth County teams that have been up there, or the 2 that have been up there, and then Red Bank Catholic joining them after winning the MCT, CBA and Wall still have the best resumes, particularly with Wall beating Jackson Liberty, who's probably the Ocean County team that's the most ironclad top 5 team, at least to this point. We got the Ocean County semifinals this weekend, so we'll find out a little bit more. As
we record this, the Ocean County tournament is down to 4 teams, and no surprise, really, the 4 that are there. No shockers for sure, but you know, Toms River North has traditionally been such a dominant team at the end of the season. It seems like the Mariners the last couple of years have had that, maybe get off to a little bit of slow start, but by the time you get into the middle and end of May, they've been the best team in Ocean County.
Yeah, and I guess you have to be a little careful for them to try to fall on that reputation. I think that's kind of what they're embracing at this point. You know, they lost to Freehold Township last night, in a game that might actually hurt them in the seeding. They lost to Jackson Memorial the second time through. They did take care of the division. They wanted to share the division title, so they did accomplish that. But they do have a lot of talent. I think they're kind of banking on that all rising to the surface when it counts. It's going to be interesting to see where they're seated, because there are some problems that they're going to have with their resume relative to, like, Manalapan, who beat them 11-1, with St. Rose, who got to the MCT final and they beat Manalapan. And if they were able to beat Freehold Township, Toms River North, that is, then that's another team they could say they beat that St. Rose didn't. But you're starting to get into common opponents that could be a problem for them, especially if, like, Raritan could step up and say, hey, we beat Freehold Township 13-3 in a tournament game when we weren't throwing over our top 3 guys either. So their positioning in that Shore Conference tournament might be a little dicey based on some losses they have, but they're a team that's good enough to beat anybody. So if it's as much of a problem for CBA having to see them in a quarterfinal as it would be, or Wall or RBC or whoever the #1 seed is, it'd be as much of a problem for them as it is for Toms River North getting stuck there. So again, you know, they have a chance to beat Jackson Saturday and maybe win the OCT. Maybe beating Jackson helps them a little bit, but it'll be interesting. But they're absolutely a contender. Even with a couple losses, 2 losses to Jackson, they're still in the mix with all the pitching they have, and Craig Larson's has been on fire lately, so they're in the mix. As
the Shore Conference tournament gets set to begin, the county tournaments will be pretty much over. Monmouth County, as you said, is over. Ocean County is down to the semifinals and then the finals. But from a pitching standpoint, what is the approach of most of these teams? Do they just save their #1 for the SCT, or do you have to mix and match as you get sort of down the schedule? And of course, rainouts always can factor in tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, the rain is always, and there's, you know, and this is the time of year where it's scattered thunder showers. It's not like we're gonna rain today. It's like, oh, it might rain at 2 o'clock and be beautiful 30 minutes later. But everybody's a little different and has different philosophies on this. Looking at the Ocean County matchups, it looks like Frank Malta at Jackson has liked to kind of play that mixed split game approach. He did that last weekend, where he split up a game against Toms River North and then had a couple different guys ready and eligible for the weekend. And they play, you know, they play at Bayonne tonight. They're probably going to kind of go Johnny Holstaff and be ready for the weekend. And they have a couple guys ready. To me, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what Jackson Liberty and Toms River East do tomorrow. because you have Nick DeGennaro who's back, and he's looked very good in his last 2 starts, so you have to figure they're going to go with him. But they have had some other guys, Santos and Brush. They've both been good, so you could save him if you wanted to. But most coaches take the philosophy, like, let's win today. We'll worry about the championship game when we get there, and I think that's what they're going to do. Tom's River North's one of those teams that we just mentioned that has a bunch of guys. Craig Larson hasn't been as on as he was on the mound last year. He's killing the ball at the plate, but
yeah.
Pitching-wise, they seem to have relied on Jared Bellissimo a little bit more, and he's probably going to get the ball tomorrow against Jackson. But Jackson's kind of been a little bit more of a split approach, and RBC showed you they'll run out a bunch of different guys. CBA's done the same thing. They've split games up. I think more and more coaches that have the staff to do it want to split the game up a little bit. They want to close with the guy who's going to pitch 3 days later rather than save the guy completely or start him the first day and then save him, which is something that East could do with DeGennaro, but everybody's got a different, and it depends on how many guys you have. If you have one guy, a lot of times you'll just say, let's run him out there for 7 innings.
It looks like there's going to be, what, as many as 28, 30 teams that make the Shore Conference tournament?
Yes, it's going to be up to 29.
29, okay.
Well, no, because either one of Howell or Middletown South can get in, so you're looking at 28 tops.
Okay.
That's interesting. They just scheduled, Howell and Middletown South just scheduled this weird doubleheader today where they're playing each other. They're both 2 games under 500. They're playing each other today. So the loser of that game is out. They're not in the Shore Conference tournament. The winner is then 1 game under 500 and will then play, right after, they will play Rumson at Middletown South. So a little bit of creativity from
basically giving someone a chance to qualify.
It's a play-in. It's one of those 2 are done after that, and the winner of it gets to go play Rumson and try to get in. Rumson, they're in already. I think Rumson's just kind of trying to build a resume a little bit. They beat Manasquan yesterday to knock Manasquan out, so you know, Rumson maybe trying to beef up the resume a little bit. I mean, they'll beat somebody, if they win that game, they beat somebody who's not in the tournament, but I think everybody understands that Middletown South and Howell are both pretty good teams despite the fact that they're fighting for their lives.
The number of teams getting in really doesn't affect the upper tier teams. They would have been in regardless, and you know, but you know, you ran over some of the top teams, and if you were a betting man, you'd say one of those teams you've named will probably win it. But if you look in the field, depending on where someone is seated, is there a team or 2 that you would not be shocked if they made a deep run and pulled off an upset? And as you said, of course, in a sport that's so often predicated on pitching, it can always happen.
Well, like you said, pitching is the magic word there, so you kind of look at the teams that have it. You know, Freehold Township has some good arms, and they've been competitive in their division. They didn't beat CBA or Manalapan this year, but they played competitive games against those 2 teams. And then you see this week, they went and beat Middletown South, scored 9 runs against them. They beat Tom's River North yesterday. Granted, it was against Tom's River North. You know, they weren't throwing one of their 2 best guys, whereas Freehold Township is trying to get into the tournament, throwing their number 1. But they've got good arms, and they've played good competition. They're a team to watch out for. Pinelands has 2 guys. You know, they're just kind of getting healthy. They didn't look particularly good against Tom's River North last weekend, but it's one day, and I think if they could maybe get rolling, they'd be dangerous. And, you know, if you're looking outside of the pitching, Marlboro's a team to watch out for because, you know, they don't have any guys that necessarily scare you on the mound, but they've been pretty solid, and they've beaten CBA, they've beaten Manalapan, they just beat St. Rose to qualify, so they've been competitive, and they've got some talent in their order, so those are always the teams to watch out for. It'll be interesting to see, you know, what Tom's River East can do now that they have their whole pitching staff. They'll probably be in the teens somewhere. But those are probably the teams to really watch out for. And it'll be interesting to see what Ace Central can do because, you know, a couple of those teams stepped up and beat Raritan, and Raritan has, you know, played pretty well and going outside the division in the Monmouth County tournament. So, you know, you could see a Vianney or a Madawan, maybe they could make some noise too out of the 20s, win a game or 2. Yeah. But I'd say deep runs, Freehold Township's a team to watch out for. Pinelands could be dangerous, they were last year. Those are probably the 2 teams because they have pitching. We really didn't mention them, you just touched on them early, but it has been a very good season for Jackson Liberty. Or they've had a nice year. Yeah, and they're just bludgeoning the ball. I mean, their lineup has just been ridiculously good. I mean, they have sophomore Brandon Kinsman, who wasn't a starter at the beginning of the year, and he's on fire now. He homered in 3 straight games. To have a guy like that who wasn't a starter basically got a shot because they had some injuries. All right, you go in. Oh, and these balls are leaving the left and right. They got guys hitting for the cycle. They got guys having 8 RBI games. They lead the Shore in runs scored. You know, their pitching is good. Matt Pickus is very good. They're a team that has like that number one. Like I was talking about the teams that could kind of pair pitchers together. They are a team that wants to get Pickus on the mound in a big game. So they're a little more interesting. Like, do they go with him for 7 against Toms River East when they have Jackson Memorial or Toms River North waiting on the other side? And that'll be a little more interesting. But they beat Jackson Memorial 14-4 without Pickus on the mound. So I think that the way they hit the ball, they have to feel pretty good about going into a scenario like this, even if they don't have Pickus on the mound. But they've been lighting up the scoreboard all year.
So the county tournaments, one is done, one is close. Then the Shore Conference tournament. Then we get to, I guess, what most people would consider the ultimate is trying to win a state championship. We have plenty of time to talk about that, but just what you've seen of teams and knowing where they are a couple teams in your mind that you like their chances of going real far here?
Well, you have to love Wall, and Wall's been kind of a regular season team the last few years. They'll run up some wins, and then the postseason they've just gotten picked off for one reason or other. Although a couple years ago they had a kind of a forgettable regular season and then beat what I thought was a really good Middletown South team. But this year's team, their pitching's been so good. They've got some bats in the lineup. The bats have kind of gone through a little bit of a lull lately, so maybe it could swing back the other way. It kind of goes back and forth. You have that pendulum effect with hitting sometimes. But with their pitching, you almost wait for Trey Dombrowski to have a bad start. The kid he gave up 3 hits the other day, and that was the most hits he's given up in a game, and he's been unreal. So if you're going to get that out of him, they're dangerous. And you know, the rest of you kind of look for those Group 3 teams. Jackson Liberty's in the same boat. They're both going to be competitive there. And with RBC and CB, they've had great years, but they're going to have to go through a very tough section with St. Augustine down there. But they're both good enough to make runs too, and they're good teams. And you know, you see how Jackson Memorial can do in a Group 4. Toms River North, same thing. They'll be down there. You never know. State tournament, you kind of look at some teams that look like they might match up, but sometimes, we had Southern last year who looked like they made their run in the OCT and that was going to be their moment, and then all of a sudden they're South Jersey 4 champs when I don't think anybody saw that coming, and that's kind of what you get in baseball, which makes it interesting once you get to the state tournament.
Well, we suffered through such miserable weather in the first part of the season.
We did.
Yeah, well, you did. Nobody spent more time in bad weather than Matt. But it's nice that we're finally getting to May. In the middle of May, it's getting a little bit nicer, and this is the fun time when teams play games. And then when you get, I always think like when you get to that state tournament, it's when you lose, you don't practice the next day because it's over. And that's it.
But unless you're like in the Shore Conference final, which is what's so weird about baseball season is that your season could be quote unquote over when you lose the state tournament game, but maybe you're in the Shore Conference semifinal, but it tends to be it's so hard for those teams to get up for after they lose the state tournament because that's what everybody wants to win. So it's always interesting to see how much teams embrace the winning the Shore Conference tournament when their season's over. But that's because
you almost wish that, and I know the schedule just doesn't allow, but you almost wish it would be like county, shore, state, and that would be it.
Right, because that's how every other sport does it. You have Shore Conference, and then it's like college basketball. Like you play your conference tournament games, and then you go to the NCAA. So if you win your conference tournament, you're excited because then you won something. You go to the NCAA tournament, you try to win something else. If you were playing, if Michigan State was knocked out of the tournament as early as they were, and then they won the Big Ten tournament, they'd be like, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they want to win the whole thing, and it's kind of the same thing in baseball. There are ways to do it. I've always been an advocate for just kind of modify the Shore Conference tournament where it's 2 county tournaments, and then the Shore Conference final is just the 2 teams that play, which is the same thing that happened last year. Toms River North won Ocean, RBC won Monmouth, and they ended up playing in the Shore Conference final.
You know what? I would be a big fan of that. I really would. I think that's a great idea. And not that we're going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do think it's a good idea. They've tried so hard with the county tournaments to find a place from years ago. Ocean County tried to play it in April, and the weather was awful, and then I also remember years when Toms River South and some of their magical teams were in the same week. They'd play a county, shore, and state. Parents never had a chance to wash clothes. Uniforms. So it's crazy. It's the nature of the game and the weather we deal with in the spring. There is some movement with the NJSIAA to move back the start of the spring season and go longer. But of course, how do you fit all the games in? But it's not a perfect world. But Shore Conference Tournament's still a big deal around here. It's something you really brag about if you win. So it should be a fun couple of weeks as we run kind of through that.
Always, yeah. Looking forward to it. It's going to be good.
Again, for a complete preview of all the teams that are in and may be in, check out shoresportsnetwork.com. Matt has it all, and he'll be the guy to follow throughout the tournament. We'll be back, obviously, at some point to a video update on what's going on with the state tournament and more. But for now, just keep it tuned to shoresportsnetwork.com. For Matt Manley, I'm Kevin Williams. Have a great baseball weekend.